Okay, so with me today is ShahAhmadi. First of all, Ashley, thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, MJ. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, first question I like asking people right now is because of quarantine and everything, especially people who are very involved in the sports industry. How has your day-to-day life changed because of quarantine?
Great question. And if you can probably imagine, it's changed pretty drastically just because, used to traveling all the time, going from city to city, airplane to airplane, hotel to hotel. And obviously all that just kind of went out the door when coronavirus and quarantine all came about. So that part's been, kind of drastic, but that was back in March and the season was sort of winding down, I guess you could say
Yeah.
anyway. There's about 17 games left. But that was still a lot of games. It was still like a month and a half left, or a month. And I came back to where my family lives, which is in Georgia, and I've kind of been here ever since. I've I've been able to do like Zoom interviews and Skype interviews, and I do a lot with CMT as well, and that's been super, super helpful. And I'm so grateful for that because, with a time like this, any work is awesome. But I love how everyone's really been adapting to. I'm hoping this isn't a new normal, but they've
Yeah.
really been adapting to, you know, how we have to kind of function now. And like I said, doing those Zoom and Skype interviews. And so we've really been focused on social media and just getting content out that way. But it's been a pretty drastic change. I'm super excited that baseball and basketball are back, even though the Hornets aren't in it. But I'm
Yes.
very, very excited to at least have sports back.
So I believe you do work in baseball and basketball, correct? So tell us
Yes.
a little bit about what you do for those listening who do not know you.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I work with Fox Sports South, and they actually broadcast. They have three NBA teams: the Atlanta Braves, the baseball team, and two hockey teams.
Okay.
And so I'm actually the Charlotte Hornets sideline reporter and host for the pre and post game show. So I that's kind of like my full time gig,
Yeah.
I guess you could say. I do all 82 games. I travel with them. That's like what takes up majority of the year. But then once the season's over, I come back and help with baseball as well, just because there's so many more games. And whenever some of the hosts or anyone needs a little bit of a break, I usually try and fill in and do some stuff for their pre and post game show, Braves Live. And so I was, that was kind of the plan when the Hornet season ended. I was going to come back and hopefully help with baseball, but now with just a 60 game format for MLB, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm not sure what kind of role I'm going to have in it, but in a normal circumstance, I usually do the pre and post game for baseball and then the full deal for the Charlotte Hornets.
So what got you into sports and reporting and TV initially?
I actually kind of realized I wanted to do this when I was 10 years old, oddly enough. I went to Atlanta Hawks game. I saw a sideline reporter. I was like, that is amazing. I would love to do that. I have two brothers. I grew up playing basketball. Sports
Yeah.
has always really been a big part of my life. But before I was that time when I was 10 years old, I wanted to deliver babies. So it was a very drastic change. But I always have loved sports. And I just, thought to myself, that would really feel like you're never working. You're always around such a awesome,
Right.
something that really brings the country together, as we've even noticed nowadays. But I kind of knew I wanted to do that really early. And then I went to the University of Georgia, got my degree in broadcast journalism, and I was able to do some internships. I was able to cover some Georgia sports there, which were really helpful. And then my very first job was as a weekend sports anchor for like a local news ABC affiliate in Meridian, Mississippi, which
Wow.
I mean, I know, but it was honestly the best first job I could have ever asked for. I, remember driving there, and it's a tiny town. It's like a truck stop town, but
Yeah.
that is one of the best jobs ever that I could have started my career with, just because, right out of college, I got to anchor 5 nights a week and just kind of perfect my skills in being on camera. And I also obviously had to produce the newscast or the sportscast and for the 6 and 10 o'clock. And I got to cover Alabama sports as well as Mississippi sports because we were just so close to the Alabama Mississippi line. And it was a great way to get my foot into the door and, like I said, just really improve on my on-camera skills and interviewing. And I spent 2 years there, and then I went to Jackson, Mississippi for 2 more years. And I it kind of, the same thing. I was a weekend sports anchor, but just in a bigger market. It was about 100 market jump. There was actually a Publix and a Kroger there, so I felt like I was living my best
The
life.
big time. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But that was great. Got to do, even more with a lot of the college football teams like Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and I covered Dak Prescott when they were #1 with Mississippi State. I covered Chad Kelly when he was with Ole Miss and they were #1 for a little bit. It was just a really great time. I felt like to be in sports, to be there, and it just helped me tremendously. And after that, I got the job with Fox Sports South as their digital reporter. And I truly, truly feel like I got that job, not just because, I'm sure they thought, she's qualified, she could probably be good on camera, but they were really impressed that I knew how to shoot, how to edit, how to write my own
Yeah.
scripts. Like, they were really impressed that I could do all that. And I know that that's a big reason that I got the job as well. So I always try and tell, younger journalists in college or wherever they may be, that you got to work your way up. You got to start from the bottom, just get as many skills that you can, and that really will help you in the long run. So that's kind of how I got to Fox Sports South. And then the Charlotte Hornets job a couple months later, they needed a host. They knew I loved basketball. It just kind of fit. And so here we are now.
And to the point of starting in the smaller markets, I honestly do think, like you said, that's the best place to start, because if you do mess up, even in a small way there, you can kind of learn from it, and you won't get as much attention as you would if you messed up now on the Charlotte's pregame show. That has a lot more attention than the little town in Mississippi that you were doing. Not that what you were doing there is insignificant at all, but you get a lot more practice, and it's
Right.
a lot lower risk than it is if you started in Charlotte.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head with that. And that's really what I try and tell people. I mean, if you were to look back at my interviews and my live shots and just how I sounded, I was so mousy. I wasn't confident. It was just, you could tell I was just beginning, but it
Yeah.
was just a great place to do it because, like you said, we were market 187 at the time out of 210. So we had, obviously people were watching us, but
Yeah.
it was just a great place to, because, I could mess up and people knew that I had just started and I just graduated and they weren't, hounding me because I mispronounced someone's name or messed up my interview. So it was such a good time for that. And I really, really, truly encourage people to, start small and work their way up. And no, did I think Meridian, Mississippi was my dream job at the time? No, but I knew that it would help me. And honestly, I had made some lifelong friends, coworkers, and I would never have traded it for the world.
So now that you're working in Charlotte and in Atlanta, what are some of your favorite things about what you do now?
I think my favorite part of it is just I get to tell these stories about the players to fans because it's on such a different level with the NBA that I wasn't really used to before, just because fans, these guys are like heroes to these people. To some
Right.
people, like basketball players or the Braves, the Hornets, just from what I've experienced, are literally heroes to these people, to fans. And so I always try and tell, little things about them to the viewers just so they can kind of realize they're like us or they're human still. And I'll always ask these random questions like, what'd you eat for breakfast today? Or what music are you listening to? And a lot of the players are always like, Ashley, why are you asking me that? Why do you want to know that? And I'm like, the fans want to know. Like, they want to know these little things about you.
Yes.
And I think it just makes them feel more connected to someone that seems so inhuman. Everyone knows what it's like to fangirl over someone. And so I always have to remember, like, people are fangirling over these players that I'm interviewing. So I always try and just give them a little bit of a taste of what they're like, just bringing them back down to earth, realizing they are human too. And I think that's probably one of my favorite parts, just because it really connects the audience, the fans, with the players.
So what's the best answer that you've gotten to that breakfast question?
Some of these guys, I think are on a very strict diet, and some of them probably not so much.
Not so
But
much.
one of our guys, Bismack Biombo, is on a very tight, strict eating schedule.
Okay.
So he is very, a lot of them have their own personal chef, but I don't know, he eats okay, these are not my words, but one of the other players described him as eating like a bird, like eating nuts and seeds, and he just eats very like a bird.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but he does eat very precise and specific. So I don't know exactly what he eats for breakfast, but I know his diet is very cutthroat. As it makes sense.
That's awesome. So I don't know how long have you been in Charlotte?
So this would have been my actual first full season.
Okay.
Last year, I started just doing the pre and post game show. So I would go up to Charlotte, do the home games, the pre and post game, and then when they would go on the road, because the sideline reporter was still there, I would go back to Atlanta, cover whatever needed to be covered back in Atlanta. And then in December of last year, our sideline reporter, the Hornets sideline reporter that had been there for a really long time, decided she got a better opportunity and she was able to be closer to her family, and it was just a really good opportunity for her, so she left. And honestly, I remember my general manager and my executive producer called me into their office and they were like, I honestly thought they were going to tell me, hey, you're doing a good job on the pregame show, or they were
Yeah.
going to say, I don't know, something, just not what they were about to drop these news. So I walked in there and I just like sat down and was just preparing to chat with them. And that's when they were like, all right, well, she got a good opportunity. She's leaving in 2 weeks. Like, you're up, pack your bags. And I'm like, this is what I've been working for since I was 10 years old. So
Yeah.
for them to just say that out of the blue, like, that was just, it was incredible. So I started sidelining kind of mid-season last year. So like I
Okay.
said, it would have been my first full season, but unfortunately we did not get to finish.
So in the time that you have been there, and what is your dream job? What's the favorite moment that you've been able to cover? I mean, because you're on the sideline, you're right in the action. So what's the favorite moment that you've been able to cover, experience, all of that?
Can I name a couple?
Go for it. Name as many as you want. You're in your dream job, Ash. You can name whatever you want.
Okay, because the All-Star game, I'm blessed enough to be able to covered it last year when it was in Charlotte with Kemba
Yes.
Walker, and it was unbelievable. Then this year I covered it in Chicago, and once again, unbelievable. I love the city of Chicago, so, and I'm not just saying that because you live there. I
Yes.
really think it's just awesome, and I think they did a great job. So All-Star games in general, just the best of the best all in one. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And we had three young guys that were in it: Devontae Graham, PJ Washington, Miles Bridges. They were all in that weekend in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So that was really exciting. And then another really cool moment, I'm not sure if you saw or if you remember, it was all over. I don't know what the Hornets, what goes on with them, but they're very good with game winners. They have a lot of them, and
Yeah, they are.
it's very exciting. I love it. I mean, they make me a nervous wreck because obviously a game winner comes down to the last second.
Right.
But last year in Toronto, Jeremy Lamb hit this
Yep.
shot that just blew the world away. And it's one of the most incredible experiences I think I've had, just because to silence an entire arena, which is what he did, because the shot was it wasn't like, yeah, you drain a 3-pointer game winner, which is still amazing.
Right.
But the shot was from not just half court, beyond half court. I mean, it
He
was
was
so,
off balance.
yes, the odds of that shot going in, I don't even want to know the physics, the mathematics to that, because it was like, it was just the most incredible feeling. And I went up to him, I was like, I'm going to interview. He's like, why do you want to interview me? I'm like, oh, you're very funny. Get over
Really.
here.
Hello.
So that was one of the coolest moments, I think, thus far. And this past year, we had some game winners too, but those are just always so much fun.
So, I mean, of course, in that moment, you have to ask the stereotypical question, how does that feel? But, like, how do you come up with an appropriate, other than that, how do you
Yeah.
come up with an appropriate question for such an extraordinary moment?
That is something that I get asked a lot about that too, because I remember when I first started, I would try to like prepare my questions so much just because
Yeah.
I was nervous. But as you keep going and as you keep doing interview after interview, you have to really be conversational and go with their flow. So
Yeah.
my biggest thing is like, yeah, I'll have my first question kind of planned, but then um except when it's a game winner, because then you obviously don't know. But
Right.
um then after that, I kind of like, I listen to their answers and then I go off of that. But for that one specifically, if you go back and listen to it, I'm literally like I can't even get the words out because it's just there's so much excitement happening. But my first question to him was basically like, how did that happen? Talk me through that. What did you see in that moment? Like, that's something that you just want to get into their head, get into the eyes of the player when something like that happens, and just you want them to take it through.
And let them
Less
go. Yeah,
more talking from them. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, for sure. And that's something I've even learned. I mean, I started with an XFL podcast. We all know how that ended up. And then I've been doing this podcast, which is kind of just all sports, for a couple months now. And even then, I went back when I started this podcast and I listened to my first interviews from the XFL podcast. And I looked at my dad, who's a speech teacher, and he was
Oh
a
no.
debate coach. Yeah, he was a debate coach for 35 years. So he knows plenty about speech and talking. And I mean, I did debate for 4 years with him. So he knows plenty about my speech patterns. So, I mean, he's been listening, which is fantastic. But I went back and listened to that, and even the growth in like the 14 episodes with the XFL one I did, I was like, oh my gosh, I was so bad. And I'm sure now this is like episode 19 or whatever of this podcast. If I go back to episode 1 of this, be like, oh my gosh, that was awful. So I can't even imagine going all the way to NBA level and then going back and listening to the beginning. I'll probably be like, who is that?
I know. All those videos are private on my YouTube from like way back in Mississippi, because I'm just like, but it's so cool to watch. And with your first podcast, like, it's practice. It's
Yeah,
practice. You just got to think about it that way. I mean, even with a podcast, you're interviewing us, and yeah, there's not, a camera on you, but I mean, we're doing a Zoom meeting, so they're
right. Kind of.
and it's so good to talk to people, as much as you can. That is the biggest thing. A huge piece of advice is just like, talk to people, because you can practice by yourself as much as you want, but then when it's like lights, camera, action, you got to be ready to go. So you're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you. So last thing I kind of want to touch on is, I mean, you've gotten to what you said was your dream job as a sideline reporter. I mean, what you've gotten your dream. So what is your next dream? What do you want to do in the next couple of years? Obviously, it's amazing being in Charlotte, doing everything you're doing right now, but what do you want to do going forward?
That's such a good question too, because I asked myself that, because literally, MJ, for the longest time, I'm so like career tunnel vision focused. I
Yes.
was always like, I'm going to make it as a sideline reporter in the NBA. Like, that is what my goal is. And I was like, I'm not stopping until that happens. So when you just have that goal for so long, and you're like, every step you take, which it wasn't even, I feel so lucky, because, I was about 5 years in the business before this happened. So that's really not that long,
No,
but
it's not.
there were times in Mississippi where I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this going to happen for me? Am I going to, like, where, there are just days where you're kind of, a little pity party for yourself, but then you
Yep.
get up and you do it again. And so I remember those times. And when it finally happened, like, it was in the middle of the season, so it was super go, go, go. But then I remember after last season, just kind of taking a minute, and sometimes I have to do this to myself, and I just have to reflect and literally pinch myself, like the saying says, because I'm like, this is my job. Like, this is what I worked for so
Right.
long. This is happening right now. And, I'm definitely not a type of person that's like, okay, well, let's throw in the towel. Like, this is it. This is where I want to be. No, there's so much more I want to do. I honestly would love to, try football. I would love
Mm-hmm.
to try even more baseball. Like, I do the pre and post game show for baseball, but not sideline or anything like that. So I'd love to dabble in, honestly, as many sports as possible. Softball, I would love to just be able to be diverse and have so many tools in my utility belt and be able to do all those little things. And also, I think it would be so fun to try play by play. And I don't know, I would
Yes.
start with even like a pee-wee baseball tournament, just to like, you tip my foot in the water and feel if I can do this or not. Because I really do think with play by play, you either have it or you don't. I mean, I'm sure you can learn,
This is
but
a whole different animal.
oh my gosh, it really is. And that's something that I would love to eventually test and see. But hopefully the goal is just to keep growing, to keep getting exposure, to keep just, and like I said, trying out different sports. I love basketball. It is my pride and joy, but just seeing where this takes me, I guess.
Well, clearly you've been very successful so far. So I have no doubt that if you want to do football, I'm pretty sure you will end up on the sideline doing football somewhere.
Well,
So I have no doubt on that. Something that just came to my head, if I can ask you real quick, is who kind of inspired you? You talked about seeing the sideline reporter when you went to a game when you were 10, but going all the way up until now, mean, even I kind of model myself off of people. Obviously, you want to be your own reporter, you want to be your own personality, but you kind of pull things from different people. So who are some of those people that you've pulled traits from?
So I think right now I really respect and admire Maria Taylor. I
Okay.
think what she does is incredible. I think she's the person that you can call for I think any job, and she'll know how to do it, or she'll learn how to do it, or she'll do it. And I love how she started. She actually started in Atlanta, was told no by one company, and now look at her. So she's just someone that I really admire and respect, and I've met her in person, and she's just as great in person. So I really admire her, as well as Doris Burke. Met her
Yep.
in the Charlotte Hornets arena bathroom last year, and I about freaked out. She came out of the bathroom stall, and I'm like, oh my God. And I try
You're like,
not to
hi.
fangirl over anyone. She's the GOAT. She's the GOAT
Yeah.
of reporting. I mean, any athlete basically knows Doris Burke and
Yeah.
will talk to her. And so to get on that level where you are so respected by these athletes that you're working with is something that I really aspire to do as well. So I really, those two are kind of like, but there's so many good ones. Oh, there's just
Oh yeah.
so many other sideline reporters that I've met from other basketball teams. I mean, even them, they like for the Brooklyn Nets. Oh my gosh, Sarah Cusack, she does play by play as well. And I just think what she does is incredible too. So there are a lot of women in this business that are just great people to aspire to be and to admire and to pick their brain. I love doing that. So I also encourage people to try and reach out to anybody. I mean, there's a lot of times where I never did get a response from some of those people, but
Oh
then
yeah.
there were some that did, and those were game changers. Just to pick someone's brain that's in this job is something that I think is really important too.
Well, first of all, thank you for responding to me. A
Oh my gosh,
perfect example of that.
no, oh my gosh, I am not on that level. I will always respond.
Well, thank
Oh,
you for that.
yes, of course. Thank you for having me and for asking me to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. This has been a lot of fun. So thank you very much for doing that. Hopefully, we'll be able to get back to the NBA, I believe in December is what they're looking at right now. So hopefully we'll be able to see you on the sideline on the pregame and postgame show for the Charlotte Hornets in December.
Yes, we'll reconvene when maybe your episode like 85 in, and hopefully
Yes,
we can reconvene when the NBA starts back up for the Hornets and go from there. Thank you so much, MJ. I appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later, Ashley.
All right, bye.